Peace and love, family. Welcome to another Read Book Club discussion. Tonight we are discussing Booker T. Washington in Africa, The Making of a Pan-Africanist by Dr. Tyrene Wright. We actually have her in the building. Peace to you, Dr. Wright. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. Thank you, Dr. Mod and Brother T,
Yes.
for
Dr.
having me.
Wright,
Hello, how are you?
fantastic,
Bro-
fantastic.
Brother T, go ahead and introduce yourself, brother, to the listening audience. Even though you really don't need an introduction because you've been everywhere. Everyone knows you from Boyce Watkins and Fly Nubian. You've been on here, so people already know
All
JT
thanks
Coins.
to the
But
book club. Thank goodness people have an interest in reading and learning about fantastic works.
absolutely.
Family, this is Brother T, definitely a member of the Read Book Club, Regain, Elevate, Aspire, and Determine Book Club. Once again, thank you for join us for another weekend. We're definitely here to read this chapter on chapter 5, the Liberian Crisis. And thanks for Dr. Wright for joining us today.
Absolutely. Family, share the show. Share. I don't even like saying show. Share the discussion. Because when you think of a show, you think of showmanship and, are you not entertained? Stuff like that. But, family, share the discussion. Tonight is going to be a
Mhm.
powerful discussion. And if you have the book or you don't have the book, still tune in. I guarantee you will learn something. And also, family, I create a playlist for each book that we've read. Okay. And so, literally, Brother T will tell you, we've read
Blueprint Black Power.
Blueprint for Black Power, Powernomics, the falsification of African consciousness, the African personality in America,
Color of Money.
Color of Money, the hidden cost of being an African American, the birth of a white nation, and now we're reading the Booker T. and Washington in Africa, The Making of a Pan-Africanist by Dr. Wright. And so, family, literally, if you go to my YouTube page, there's a playlist for every book that we've read. So make sure that if you've missed any of these discussions, that you go back and you check them out in the archives. All right,
Mhm.
Brother T. So go ahead and kick us off, brother, for chapter 5, the Liberian Crisis.
Awesome. Chapter 5, the Liberian Crisis. I always like to start off with what um, Dr. Tyrene Wright start off with, which is always a great quote. She
Mm-hmm.
pulled off, no one, not even the citizens of Liberia, is more interested in the progress and success of the Republic than I am. This is a quote from Booker T. Washington. This chapter here was eye-opening for me because
Same here. Same
I
here.
never learned the intimate connection on the beginning of Liberia. Even though I have my father that was born and raised in Liberia, I never learned it. I never seeked out to really get this type of information. So I really appreciate this chapter because I learned a lot about how Booker T was really adamant about getting Liberia help, funding, and getting some programs based there. So we start off the chapter in 1825, the American Colonization Society. I think I shared that coin on the show a couple weeks back
Mm-hmm.
from that society. It was granted full governing power over Liberia. But however, from 1825 to 1848, Liberia was neither an American protectorate nor a sovereign state. So this was very interesting, especially when we start going to the later pages on exactly why the United States really didn't offer as much that Liberia really needed. Needed a lot more support, a lot, and some of the things that Booker T. Washington laid out, I found out from this chapter, would have been a great help. But unlike America, just like America, they only give out band-aids and giving out the funds, I believe, was that. But this first page based off on at least the American Colonization Society and how they was governed over Liberia. Doc, you want to go further on this
Dr.
page?
Wright.
Yes, yes. Do I want to say, no, you're correct. Your reading of that is correct. The United States never really wanted to um, define its relationship to Liberia because, to define your relationship to a nation or a nation state is to say now, what are going to be the economic implications? And so if you don't define the nature of the relationship, you have no economic commitment to make. So that was one of the reasons there why there's just very vague language around the relationship between Liberia and the United States at that point in time. You know, and it's unfortunate, but that's the those are the historical facts as far as that was concerned.
Mm-hmm. And then I never heard of the American Colonization Society family. So I went and looked it up. Okay. Dr. Wright, I'm telling you, she's always, stating facts. And some of these facts, your girl, Dr. Ma'at, have never heard of. So she mentioned, the American Colonization Society. So I looked it up. I was like, what is that? And came across an article that talked about it. And essentially it was a society for the colonization, it says, of free people of color of America until 1837. They said it was founded in 1816. One of the founders, his name was Robert Finley. He was a clergyman, and it was to encourage and support the migration of free African Americans to the continent of Africa. And just a little bit of background information, if you could bear with me, Dr. Wright and T. It says the American Colonization Society was founded in response to what was seen as a growing social problem: what to do with free blacks, right? It says the number of free people of color grew steadily following the American Revolutionary War, from 60,000 in 1790 to 300,000 by 1830. Slave owners feared that these free blacks might help their slaves to escape or rebel. In addition, many white Americans believed that African Americans were an inferior race and therefore should be relocated to a place where they could live in peace, a place where they would not encounter prejudice, a place where they could be citizens. So it says the African American community and the abolitionist movement overwhelmingly opposed the project. Okay, it says in most cases, African Americans' families had lived in the United States for generations, and their prevailing sentiment was that they were no more African than white Americans were European. All right. And it says, contrary to the claims which stated that their immigration was voluntary, many African Americans, both free and enslaved, were pressured into migrating. All right. And so it says right here, I just want to read this last sentence. It says, indeed, enslavers sometimes manumitted their slaves on the condition that the freedmen would leave the country immediately. All right. And so that's just a little description of, like I said, the American Colonization Society, because when she mentioned it on the first page, I was like, what is this? I never heard of this organization. Like, so she mentions organizations, people, and events, honey, that I haven't heard of. And so I'll go back and say, all right, well, let me dig into this a little bit deeper. And so that's what I came up with. Doc, did you want to add something?
Yes, I did. And we should understand that this was a racist organization in essence. A lot of people criticize historically, back to Africa movements over the years. And this was the only entity that successfully expatriated and resettled African people who had survived slavery here to the continent of Africa. And they're not criticized for it. Okay. So in other words, let me say it another way. Back to Africa movements initiated by Black people and for Black people are always heavily criticized. However, the most successful Back to Africa movements was initiated by this racist organization and actually did successfully repatriate or settle African people in America, Black people in America, back to Africa. And so it's such irony in that, because for us to say as Black people, as African people, we want to go back to Africa, it's pathologized. But for white people to say, we want to get you out of America and send you back to Africa, it is not. It's applauded almost. So I just want to note that. And then the people, the American Colonization Society, they have archives in the Library of Congress. And what you could find there are a host of letters over the years by people who had survived enslavement here and were requesting repatriation back to Africa because they were the only entity funding such an endeavor. So there are many. There's a you know there's
She went out
there's
on.
work. Yeah, someone was
Which,
trying to call me, but
Okay.
there's work left to be done on that area because there are tons of letters, many letters that were sent to the American Colonization Society for the purpose of being repatriated. Individual Black people writing and saying, I want to go back to Africa. I'll leave everything that I have here to live free and without, the type of oppression we experience here in America. So it was really amazing, that they felt like they could even write and that there was such an entity. But yes, their motivations, the organization itself was racist, brutally racist in nature.
I'm glad that you made that um, came up with this Dr. Wright, because I never knew about the organization, as Dr. Ma'at mentioned, especially the racist origin, because it seemed to me that this organization was cloaked with being good white folks wanting to help people out by sending, um, captives of in America back to the continent. So having this, um, you explain this so clearly, bring some light. Now, why was they so successful compared to the ancestors who wanted to go back, and as you explained, why was the American Colonization Society successful in their endeavors?
Because they had the resources to do it. They had the resources to actually expatriate or repatriate people to Africa. Whereas those of us coming out of enslavement, we didn't have the resources to return to the continent. We didn't bring ourselves here. so, so, and of course, obviously the legacy, the mark of enslavement is poverty, perpetual poverty. So very few African people in America who had survived slavery could afford to expatriate, repatriate, resettle on the African continent. But this
Mhm.
program, the American Colonization Society, there are individuals involved in it who are in the U.S. government.
Okay.
Okay. Many of them are in the U.S. government. Lincoln even supported it before he died, in the sense that he was saying, the truth of the matter is that Black people will never be equal to white people in America, and we're sort of fooling them, much like what Thomas Dixon was saying, like, you're doing this, you're producing a class of people, send that to Liberia. So
Hmm.
that was sort of the sentiment. And it was successful because they had the financial backing and wherewithal to actually execute this, right? As they would, right?
Really would.
You have people who were in perpetual slavery and therefore perpetually impoverished. And you have people who became perpetually wealthy as a result of the same institution and system.
The question also came from, I want to ask, did they have something to gain financially from sending back did they gain any resources from this act of sending ancestors back to the continent? That's other than having the means of doing it, was there any ties to wealth that they could also gain from um, new people coming to the continent and going back to the continent? I want to be tied to any business of any type that we know of.
Not that I know of immediately, but you read the chapter. In the end, yes, right? In the end,
Right.
yes,
Firestone.
right? By the end of this case that we are reading, yes, there are some, and that's why you see the United States change its posture too
Hmm.
in the end to some degree. Because then, I mean, I don't want to blow it up right now, so I don't know
You
if you
did.
want to.
No, don't blow it up. No, don't blow
Okay,
it up.
because
That
I
don't
could
blow it up.
just say what the entities were. But initially, this long, arduous period in the beginning, right?
Hmm.
That Washington is actually working through, right? They do not know about the industries that could be exploited by the United States. By the
Hmm.
time we get to the end of the case, which really this is sort of uh, a test of endurance for Washington, because this case takes place over about 5 years
Yes.
at least, and working behind the scenes and things of that nature. So, point A, where it begins, the knowledge about the resources that Liberia holds is very different in terms of the U.S. knowledge of the resources by the time the case comes to resolution. Right. So there are things, but they are not a issue or a factor in the beginning of the situation. And you're pointing out something very good in the sense that you can see how resources and the implications of resources um, will determine foreign policy and US initiatives in Africa or anywhere else, right? So if there's no economic interest in the region, nothing to extract, then there's not going to be any real commitment. And you can also extend that to, just the very fleeting commitment in the beginning to Liberia, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
we don't really care that much about the people. Okay, this entity is resettling them. Some of us are entrenched in the government and political spaces, so that's all the energy they get in terms of commitment. But we're not going to make, as a nation, the United States is not going to make any commitment to the population or to Liberia itself because of the economic piece. By the end of the situation, the posture is different, right? Because they do discover things, and I don't want to. So
No,
I'll
no,
leave it there.
yeah, I don't know. And someone asked in the chat,
Mhm.
your Pete Imports LLC said, Doctor, was the Republican Party founded by members of the American Colonization Society?
I don't know if the Republican Party was founded by members of the American Colonization Society, but I do know that there is a coalescing between members of the Republican Party and the American Colonization Society. So that's part of the reason why I made the comment about Lincoln having the same position, right? And of course, he's certainly in the leadership of the Republican Party of the period, even prior, so I wouldn't be surprised. But in terms of, point in case specific individuals other than Lincoln and those who are politically connected to him, I don't know the answer to that per se, but I wouldn't imagine that they are, right? Because this whole concept of expatriate, this idea only comes about really as a result of the fact that they realize that you have both free and still enslave African people in this country, and they're not going to extend the normal freedoms. Think about this. To be a free African in American society without the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution,
Mm,
right? So you are free, but you are not quite a citizen. And you don't have 14th Amendment is about the equal protection under the law,
mm,
right? So we never really think about that, right? We think 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments to the Constitution, African people come out of enslavement and they have those amendments as, the Reconstruction Amendments as protections to some degree for rights and citizenship. But what about all the African people who were free prior to the end of the Civil War?
mm,
Which were north, right? So, in a place like New York specifically, the manumission process begins in 1799 and it's a 27-year period. So, by 1827, 1828, You have free African population in a place like New York State and city. But they have no 14th and 15th Amendment that would give them equal protection under the law. They have no voting rights as well. And so they are pretty much an unprotected group of free people, but not citizens,
Mm.
right? So very complicated situation. So they're always deemed as, the a problem, right? Because they don't want to extend those rights to those free African persons who are in fact in a legal sense not citizens, right? 14th Amendment hasn't come. And so it's an issue here. And so this is part of the strategizing amongst white, active racists in the country, like, hey, let's resettle them, go ahead. And
Right,
some of
right.
them actually want to leave, so let's get them out of here.
Yeah, but Doc, I've read also in the article in Family, I could drop the link to the article in here. It said they resettled them without any resources, and a lot of them died. Hold on, let me see where I can find that. Um, where I can find it. It says, according to historian Mark Lepson, colonization proved to be a giant failure, doing nothing to stem the forces that brought the nation the Civil War. Between 1821 and 1847, only a few thousand African Americans out of millions in the U.S. Immigrated to what would become Liberia. By 1833, the society had transported to the future Liberia 2,769 individuals, while the increase in Black population in the U.S. during those same years was about 500,000. Close to half of them died from tropical diseases. In addition, the transportation of the immigrants to the African continent included the provisioning of requisite tools and supplies proved to be very expensive. Okay, so maybe that's what I read. Okay, that part. So some people died and it was a failure, and so. But anyway, so
It, oh,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, go
No, no,
ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead. You was going to ask something.
I was just gonna say, it wasn't a failure in the sense that they actually literally expatriated some people, resettled some people. But yes, I mean, I think it was treated with the same way that the people were treated. Like, let's get you
Mm,
out of here, because the possibility of us extending any real rights to you as a human being in this place, we're not going to share power. We're not going to make you equal. So it was treated with the same disdain, right? And
mm,
so um successful, when I say most successful back to Africa, um I wouldn't say movement, but I would say execution, means that they actually got the people out of the US and on the African continent. But not successful in the sense that it was bound up with any of our ideal aspirations beyond sending people back to Africa, right? Meaning that
right,
they were not well taken care of, they were not supported, they were not,
right,
it was in true American form, to be quite frank. Like, that's sort of kind of been the relationship of the United States to Black people in general, right? Even at the end of slavery. Okay, 250 years of enslavement, you're on your own. Bye. Be happy that you're free. Right? No
mm,
support. I mean, and don't get me wrong, sure, there's the Freedmen's Society and all that kind of stuff, but there's support for the first 12 years out of enslavement. And then after that, it's sort of like, no, you guys are moving too fast. We're not supporting you because you'll outdo us, and you're moving too fast.
mm. And
So
they kept their foot on our necks, which they
absolutely.
which they
Absolutely.
still attempting to do. Keep their foot out. Yeah, they don't want you to outdo them at all. And so, fast forward, we see that I think it was Britain. I'm sorry, I said British. Britain and France who said, "Oh, wait a minute. I may want to annex some of this territory." I think it was France initially. France was on one end, and then Britain was on another end. They said, well, "Wait a minute. I will go over here and get some of this territory." And so it said that they wrote a letter. I think it was Britain that reached out to the U.S. and said, "Hey, what's your relationship with Liberia?" And then the U.S. responded with some gave them a vague answer. But they were saying, I think the French said, "Well, hey." I think the British said, well, look, if the French take this side, we're going to take that side. And I couldn't help but to think about colonizers, brother T. How do you sit there and go into someone else's land and just decide what part you're going to take? So someone said, I'm taking the Northwest. The other European power said, well, I'm going to take the Southeast. Right. And then you talking to the US saying, well, what side do you want, or what's your relationship? Because we're going to go over here. And I said, wow, brother T, just the arrogance that they have, the just the way they think, that you can come off. So for example, when the Spanish came over here, they just hop out of book hop out of a boat, brother T, with a scroll and say, this is our land, and these are the. How do you go to the indigenous people, right? Indigenous land, and tell those people, this is what I'm going to do. I'm coming over to your land. We're now going to establish a government here, and my European buddies, they're going to take the North. I'm going to take the South, and like, how do you do that? And that's why I titled this show, "The Colonizers at Work," but look at who stopped them. The colonizers at work. And this is what we see when we study history. This is their pattern. This is what they always do. Dr. Wright, go ahead and chime in.
No, absolutely. It's interesting because I had a conversation with a non-Black person, and they were familiar with this book, and they asked, "Oh, you wrote about the Liberian crisis, and what legitimate claims did the French and British have to Liberia?" And I said, none.
None.
Like,
None.
And the person said, "Oh, well, what were the claims that they were making?" I said, they had no claims. They had no claims except for that, this is a territory, and if the United States, who could back their position with force, was not claiming it, then we will. Okay. And it was about force. It was about who had the power to, in essence, annex and seize the territory, because that is what's going on at the time, right? European nations, imperialists, are gobbling up the African continent. And certainly the indigenous population is not going to stand in their way. And I'm not saying that, I'm saying that from the other side, meaning that that's their thinking, right? Like, we're not worried about the natives. We'll kill them. We'll do whatever we want to take the territory, right? And so, yes, they are competing with each other, and we already know the French and British compete with each other historically and over territories, particularly in Africa, right? They get the lion's share of territories, and so they are threatening to imitate each other on opposing borders in an effort to take the territory. But the United States, they keep sort of checking in with the United States, like, do you want this?
Yeah.
If you don't want it, we're about to take it. What's your, because they know that there are, African people have been resettled there. So they definitely are checking in just to see if a nation that has the force and power to back them up is actually interested in the territory. And when the United States does not state any claim, they're like, okay.
Yeah, they said, okay. And it says at the top of your book on page 89 that Liberia eventually lost a portion of its territory to France in 1907, and not until the Liberian Crisis of 1907 would the U.S. actually intervene in any significant way. And so you went into how and why the U.S. intervened. And it was Ernest Lyon, who was the U.S. Minister and Consul General to Liberia. He wrote Booker T and said, man, brother, they're coming in here. We got the French that we're dealing with, the British, they're coming in here to annex our land. We need your help. And what I loved that you pointed out about Booker T. Washington, you said he was skilled in American politics and power brokering. That was important. So he had the skill, and people knew that he had the skill. Not only did he have the skills in American politics and in power brokering, he had connections. He advised several presidents. And at that particular time, he was an advisor to Roosevelt. And so, Booker T. Washington said, okay, man, I'll get involved, and he became involved, and he solicited the help of President Roosevelt. Now, President Roosevelt was saying, okay, um, now hold up. I want to say this. The way it was presented to him, President Roosevelt said, well, we could get involved if this will secure the Negro vote. So that's what Booker T. Washington did. He leveraged the African American vote, saying, hey, man, look, we got 3 million African Americans, that'll vote for you, if you get involved in this. And so what Booker T. Washington did was leverage our vote, which was at that time 3 million strong. And back in the day, we used to vote in blocks, and we still do typically vote in blocks. I mean, some people are switching parties and all of that stuff, but the majority of us still vote in a block. And they knew that. And so Roosevelt was saying, okay, this was sew up the African American vote for the president elect at that particular time. His name was Taft. Was it William Taft, Brother T? I think it was
Vice President. Yeah, Vice President Taft.
Exactly. Yeah, and so he was saying, go ahead, Brother T. Did you want to?
No, go ahead, sister. That's Taft was the next president in line after Roosevelt. Yes.
Yeah, so they said we could, Booker T. Washington said, "Hey, man, look, you can get the Negro, secure the Negro vote, if you get involved." And so not only did Booker T. Washington become involved, I mean, Dr. Wright, you did a wonderful job explaining how this man went over and beyond. I mean, he went to Roosevelt and said, "Look, man, I want to bring, a Liberian envoy over here, the Liberian Commission to come on over here." And Booker T. Washington did try to get him to, to give them a formal invitation here. But Roosevelt said, hold up, now, brother, you're going to, I'm not doing that. Now you bring them over here because, Booker T. Washington was saying, hey, black folks would love to see if you, basically rolled out the red carpet for the Liberian Commission. But Roosevelt said, nah, I'm not with that. But what I will agree to is a meeting at the White House with the Liberian Commission. And so Booker T. Washington, he arranged their travel, their lodging. He hosted them at Tuskegee. There were several meetings at Tuskegee, and he secured a meeting between the Liberian Commission and President Roosevelt and also President-elect Taft. And so he was able to secure those meetings. Dr. Wright, Brother T, that you all want to chime in?
The beauty of Booker T, what I learned from this chapter was his political connections, the way he worked it in to be an advisor to the president, Teddy Roosevelt. It was amazing. But we also learned from previous chapters on how people feared Booker T because of his connections. As we learned that Leopold was trying to get in contact with Booker T based off his connections and realizing how much influence he had. But the way that his savviness was knowing he was meeting with the president, and also realized that there's a change of power happening when Taft comes in, and he wanted to jump on that right away. Where I was really impressed on, hey, let's start sending these letters, let's start setting up these arrangements. And I think that Dr. Wright, if I'm correct, in this chapter, you posed that Taft, he wanted to jump on Taft and let him know the agenda, and kind of gave the impression that there was secret meetings with Booker T and presidents, letting Taft know that, hey, I do this thing. This is what I do. I'm here to speak for the 3 million African American people. Get your vote, push against your agenda. So he was letting them know that I've been doing this, and I'd like to continue this relationship if I can. Dr. Wright?
Exactly. So just a couple of points. Is it 3 million or is it 4 million? Because what the point, it says 3 million.
It said 3 in your
3
book.
million.
Okay. So what he's doing. So initially, Roosevelt, he talks to Roosevelt in writing about Liberia, and he says, like, I want to help Liberia. This is what's going on. Roosevelt is only in word, I think, at that point, right? And then the Liberian Commission comes to the U.S. They come into D.C., and we have to remember that they're not flying, right? They're going by ship. So That's also an interesting point that kind of has a little scenario around it later on, right? Because there is a
Yes.
commission that goes to Liberia to sort of evaluate the conditions on the ground. But so Roosevelt is in terms of word at that point. But if you notice, this issue with the black vote in the United States comes up, and it's important to understand how Washington does that, because you're right, he leverages it. And it's not it, once again, he is a master of double speak. And so he says to Roosevelt, and this may not be the direct quote, but this is very close to it because I'm not looking at the exact page. But
I have it.
okay, he says, whatever you do or fail to do, right? Basically, in the preservation of Liberia, the X number of Negroes, millions, will remember that at voting time. To me, that sounds a little bit like a soft threat uh, of sorts. Like, so, because you have to remember what's the larger public narrative at this time, right? No one knows that this is going on in the public realm, right? So here's Washington behind the scenes, the person that in the public realm people do not think is an advocate of voting rights, right? And invoking the amendments that were provided for us as a result of Reconstruction. And here he is, though, leveraging the Black vote on behalf of negotiations in terms of preserving Liberia. Very interesting. Okay, because once again, you have to ask the question, who is this guy? Is he really who we think he is? Right? Because he's certainly in the public realm, not on the blowhorn about voting rights, right? He's not weighing in the same way as someone like Du Bois, as some people would see it, right? That's not his whole platform. However, he is certainly aware of it. He certainly supports Black voting rights. And Tuskegee is a progressive community. That's how we, if we went all the way to the back of beginning of the founding of Tuskegee, we know that Tuskegeans during the Reconstruction period, coming out of that period, are active politically, right? Um, so it's interesting to see how he does that. He tells Roosevelt, gives him that soft threat, like, whatever you do or fail to do, we'll remember it. So you want to be on the right side of the situation. And
Absolutely.
so then also, just another point. So Washington, yes, he had been a part of many secret meetings, and this was also a commentary on what the contrast between what is happening in the public realm and what is actually happening privately and in reality, which is that in about 1905, there's a big deal made about Washington coming to the White House to meet Roosevelt. And it was in the public press and the newspapers and all of that, as though this is the first time a Black man in America would go to the White House to meet the president. Of course, this was not really real. I mean, he did go, but he had gone on many occasions, because this particular meeting that's documented in the papers and then in this book uh, is one of many meetings Washington would have at the White House. Okay, so the meeting between the Liberian Commission and Booker T. Washington is set up by Washington, and you're right, Doctor Mott. It's Taft. It's Roosevelt. It's Taft, and there's also the Secretary of State, Elihu Root, who leads the State Department, and that's not a normal thing, right? Nations appealing to the United States for support politically or otherwise, economically as well, do not get to meet the Secretary of State and directly engage them. They appeal just to the State Department, and then I guess their appeals are dealt with in whatever the protocol is in that fashion. This is different. He brings the commission, and the commissioner, by the way, the image that's in shadow on the cover of the book, and then inside the book, and then on the chapter, on this chapter, the Liberian Commission, those are the individuals, okay, officials that are sitting down that would be part of that commission. They would come to the White House on a particular evening, and they would directly meet with these individuals. Uh, that being said, yes, Brother T, Washington is acutely aware of the change of administration and that it's coming, and he's doing this to protect and secure whatever negotiations he makes with the Roosevelt administration, that it would carry over to the Taft administration. He's trying to secure the negotiations so they're not disrupted in the change of administration, right? And so he's very much has is a planner and a strategist
Mm-hmm.
of kinds. And in those moments you have to think about who, once again, is this man? Like, who is this guy? He is someone who was born in enslavement, right? He didn't just hear about slavery, he was born in enslavement. He is at least aware of the fact that he was enslaved. And because we don't know exactly when he was born, we think he was about, according to him, around the age of 9. He could have been 10, he could have been 8, who knows? Because he's enslaved, so he wouldn't have a birth certificate or anything. But
Mm.
this is a person who is born into chattel slavery and has the nerve to be negotiating the fate of an African territory and then nation with US presidents. And I don't think he's exactly I mean, just we're not moving like this now. That's all I can say. We're not moving.
Dr. Wright, say it again.
We're not,
Say it again.
we're not moving like this now. He's telling these guys what he wants them to do. Now they're not going for all of it, but they're going for most of it. You get what I'm saying? And
Absolutely. And look, and I felt like, like you said, they went for a lot of it. And I thought that he was pushing the envelope. He said, I want you to give them a formal welcome when they come. And then Roosevelt said, look, man, I'm not doing that. But he pushed for it. He pushed for it. And they
yes, he
gave,
tried it. He
yeah,
tried it.
he tried it. He tried it. But that goes to show you how much pull Booker T. Washington had. On page 98, right above the U.S. Commission to Liberia, you said that the Liberian Commission probably asked for not only support, but for a formal protectorate agreement of some sort. However, it never materialized. So the plans to investigate the conditions in Liberia moved forward without formal commitment. And I'm glad that you ended with that, because what I was thinking I know that Booker T. Washington set up a 1-hour meeting between the Liberian envoy and Roosevelt, and also with Taft. And I was like, I know they asked for more than just support. You get what I'm saying? And so then when you ended that section and you said, well, they probably, so we don't know. But in my mind, I was assuming that if I sat down with the president, I wouldn't just say, well, can I get some support? Like, you want something formal, And but you said that it never materialized. However, there were plans to investigate the conditions in Liberia that moved forward without a formal commitment. And so they put together this U.S. commission to send to Liberia. Now, another demonstration of Booker T. Washington's pull is that they told him, well, you could select one person. So it was 3 men. And out of the 3 men, they told, actually, they wanted Booker T. Washington to go. And he said, well, you know what? I'm not going to go. I want to stay back here, keep an eye on my school, keep an eye on Tuskegee. I'll send my secretary, Emmett Scott, instead to Liberia. And so, he actually chose one of the 3 U.S. commission officers or members to go to Liberia. It says the general objective of the commission was to study the conditions in the country, as no one within the U.S. Was versed in matters concerning Liberia or in the events leading up to the territorial dispute. So, they were on a mission to see what was going on. And I know, Dr. Wright, what you were getting ready to get into, that situation that happened with the 3 people, the 3 commissioners. So you had 1 black, the other 2 white, and the white ones didn't want to go with the black ones. So they end up having to send 3 separate vessels. at 3 separate times in the order in which they were appointed, which was bananas. But they said it came out in the, I want to say, was it the New York Times? Hold on.
Yes, it's the Times.
Yeah, the New York Times wrote about the issue, and it was an article titled "Go Separately to Liberia." So you had Faulkner. Faulkner was like, "Look, I don't want to be on the vessel with Emmett Scott. With segregated accommodations." He was like, "I want a totally different vessel altogether." And so when I read that, Dr. Wright, I couldn't help but to think, when he got over there to Liberia. I mean, you get what I'm saying? Like his assessment of what was going on, because he's a racist, like he's a racist. And so what I was thinking was, okay, well, how is he going to assess, what's going on and what's happening in Liberia through his racist eyes? I questioned it. I questioned if he was even able to not inject his bias into him assessing what was going on with Liberia. You know what I mean? Given that he's a racist, he doesn't even want to ride on a ship, a vessel with a black person. So I was thinking, like, well, how, I know it's some sort of bias that will be interjected in his assessment. And so I started thinking about that. But go ahead, Dr. Ray. I see you unmute your mic.
Yes, I agree. But I think what we have to remember is that, I'm just going to say, America, I'd certainly then, and some try to say not now, but I would probably debate them on that point, is a white nationalist exhibition nation. This is an expression of white nationalism. I think we couldn't talk about any of them as not racist. I would assume that they all are, right?
Yeah, well, that's true.
And
Yeah.
it's just more overt about it than others. Once again, going back to the beginning of this case, the American Colonization Society in and of itself is a known racist organization.
Mm.
In and of itself. But yes, I thought some of the same things. I was looking for, just more about like that individual and, some of what he said. But the reality is that we would have to ask the question: are any of them not racist?
Right.
Right?
Right.
And I mean, even if any of them, they are white men. They know they hold the power here, and how they get power is through unethical ways. And so, yes, there are degrees now of it, right? But
Right.
certainly, I feel like the subtext of all of this is that the United States doesn't want to do anything for Liberia. Period.
Mm.
They don't want to do anything for Liberia. This is all forced behavior to a degree, and forced somewhat by Washington, leveraging whatever little soft power he has, right? Which is extraordinary, because
Absolutely.
it's extraordinary study of power and power dynamics, because I would assume, in my assumption, even knowing all the facts, is that they don't want to do anything. And that's exhibited by before, during, and after this particular case, right?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And so then they end up going over there and coming back with some recommendations. So, Brother T, could you read the recommendations for us? Bottom of 101 to 102.
Yep, you go to the page on 101, the Commission's recommendations. That the United States extend its aid to Liberia in a prompt settlement of pending boundary disputes. And the second one was by assuming as a guarantee for the payment of obligations under the arrangement, the control and collection of the Liberia customs. It's proposed a customs receivership similar to one existing in the San Domingo. The United States lend its assistance to the Liberian government in the reform of its internal finances. Number four, the United States should lend aid to Liberia in organizing and training adequate constabulary or frontier forces. Number five, the United States should establish and maintain a research station in Liberia. And number 6, the United States should reopen the question of establishing a naval coaling station in Liberia. So this is all sent to in March of 1910 to President Taft. He sent the commission's recommendation to Congress, as we know and later learned in this chapter that it was rejected. And from this rejection, what was given as other countries like Honduras was just a fund. But none of these recommendations that would probably help Liberia in any way other than a fund was given. So unfortunately, they was not trying to help Liberia in no other form or take them under their wing to help the government by any which way. So that's what I found. At least the recommendation was put together, but what could the fund do? The fund had no aim, no strategy sent with it. So I was kind of confused about what that was, how that helped even the other countries that were given the fund alike.
So what I saw at the bottom of page 103, so like you said, Brother T, they gave him a fund. It says that he arranged, and then when they say he, they're talking about President Taft, that he arranged to have a private loan secured for Liberia, which was to be overseen by multinational officers and administered by an American manager. So Dr. Wright tells us at the bottom, the nation involved in the loan, and in quotes, says the loan would be subscribed equally by American, British, French, and German bankers, with customs receivership comprised of representatives from these 4 countries. And so she goes on to tell us towards the bottom of page 105 that each of the colonial stakeholders serving the receivership to the loan for Liberia stood to gain something for their involvement. So I knew it was something, Brother T. Like, I knew it wasn't just, here goes some money, we want to help you all out. No. The colonial stakeholders serving in the receivership. And who were they? Who were the stakeholders? Remember, she said America, Britain, France, and Germany, right? So she said each colonial stakeholder serving in receivership to the loan for Liberia stood to gain something for their involvement. The French got the promise of free trade. The British would annex a territory bordering Sierra Leone. So at the end, they still got a little piece. It says each nation would accept the conditions and terms of the agreement, and officers were appointed from each country. Roland Faulkner, who was one of the U.S. Commission officers, it says he would serve as the loan officer for the United States and as the managing officer of the loan to the other nations. And so then and she says that the loan was transferred to Liberia in 1912. And so there you have it. So, I mean, he stepped in, and at least they didn't, remember, you had French trying to get one side and Britain tried to get one side. So Booker T was, able to, prevent, that from happening largely. But they still had to give a little bit, right?
Right.
But in order to get what he wanted.
In that sense, and I'm giving a little bit, as we see that America later on wanted Liberia, and they said forced labor on the rubber company Firestone. So that was put on Liberian soil, but didn't benefit the people. And only because the U.S. wanted to put that company there to compete with I guess with Great Britain at the time as well, because they had a thriving. They was number one in rubber production at the time, I believe. So I was when I learned about that, it made me wonder: is that why Britain wanted Liberia early in the 1850s? Because around 1856 is when they created their first rubber company. So now the number one force in rubber production. Now the U.S. wants to see how they can benefit from Liberia by putting forced labor there and also putting Firestone, which made them pretty wealthy. So I was wondering from the start of the chapter, was Great Britain's plan in the beginning to set up shop there? As we see, they got a piece of it. But I wonder if they wanted originally to start their rubber production in Liberia, since the rubber tree is on the in that country.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Wright?
Right. So, um, a couple of things. Yes. So the original agreement that Washington works tirelessly to like put together, it doesn't pass, right? In the Senate, it doesn't get the support. And so then this is a under the table deal, this whole multinational situation, right? So it's not necessarily, it doesn't go through the Senate. If you see, you notice there, it doesn't go through the same legislative process or anything like that. So that once again, that emphasizes that the United States in no real official legislative way wanted to support Liberia. So they go with this alternative, which is sort of like when that failed, Washington's like, no, I'm not willing to let it go. So he gets this situation put together. However, uh you have to understand the time frame, right? This is years into the situation by the time they come to sort of a resolution that is applied, right? And in that time period, they would figure out, oh, there's rubber in the country. At the beginning of this case, I sort of implied, that they didn't know. And that also has that factored into the reality that they would make no commitment, right? Because they don't know. And when I say they, I'm talking about the United States. It's politicians and officials. They don't know about rubber in the country. They don't know for sure about that, right? So
Hmm.
they are not, they don't have any economic interest there. The United States at that time is more committed to trying to strong arm so-called Latin America, right? And the Americas. That's what they're focused on exploiting. They're not looking at Africa. They're like, okay, we'll leave that up to, the Europeans in particular. And so with this situation, yes, it is the live to fight another day kind of deal, right? Not the best deal, but the only deal. The United States gets the chance as a result of brokering this multinational deal to put Firestone in the country, put a U.S. military base in the country in upcoming years, amongst other things, right? And support their markets around Firestone. But the irony of this is that the only way to secure this nation for African people is to pay off people who have not no right to the territory, right? So I
Hmm.
don't know if you all pick that up, right? Like, what should the British be paid for Liberia? What should the French be paid for Liberia? I was never able to find out what the so called debts Liberia had to any of those entities. So I could assume that they were just ones that they were asserting, because what do the French and British have? What right do they have to a territory in Africa? None. I think it's quite obvious, right? But
Absolutely.
they had to pay off these entities to stop their on the ground military aggression in trying to seize the territories. Now, what do African people get out of it? And that's the part that we can't forget about, right? Although compromised, although I would say a little battered in the situation, they still get a nation.
Mm.
Hmm.
One of only two African nations that are independent and free, right? And listen, as small as it may seem in this deal, a nation is a nation. It's what we don't have, certainly.
True.
I'm talking about us African folks
True.
here. We don't have a nation of our own per se. So
Mm.
for any real nationalist, to be quite frank, and I have this conversation all the time, that's what nationalists want, a nation.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
They don't want, to monopolize the bus system, the school system, the medical system. No, because why? With a nation, they can do all of those things for themselves. So nationalists want land. They want the territory. And they got the territory. Liberians got it. However, the
True.
elephant in the room with this situation in Liberia is what is going on between so-called Americo-Liberians and the indigenous Liberian population, which this is a perfect opportunity to critique and even criticize the dynamics there, because this is an important thing.
Hmm.
And Washington gives his recommendations. I won't spoil it. I'll let you, if you could.
I'm about to say that was next, Doc. So you weren't going to
Yes.
spoil it, but he does give his recommendations, and she's talking family at the bottom of page 105,
Hmm.
where Booker T. Washington, gave his recommendations, which he communicated directly to Ernest Lyon. And Ernest Lyon got fired, by the way. You said that on page 105. You said he got before the crisis was completely resolved. Ernest Lyon, who was the U.S. Consul General to Liberia, he was fired, and you said that his dismissal, details surrounding his dismissal, were withheld from Booker T. Washington. But anyway, so Booker T. Washington gave his own recommendation to Ernest Lyon and the president, Daniel Howard of Liberia. And so there were three things that Booker T. Washington said. The first thing was he warned President Howard regarding the rift between Liberians and Americo-Liberians. And so Washington warned that the failure to resolve conflicts between the two populations, it would hinder the nation's growth and threaten its eventual. I'm sorry. Its eventual stability. It's like, golly, that Baltimore lazy tongue tea is just like we have
It's
that
there.
lazy tongue, so it's like certain words in a certain order, man. It jacks us up. But anyway, so he said, look, you got to deal with this. And so, Dr. Wright, what I wrote on that same page was how you had when I read that, I thought about, and before I articulate what I wrote down, I thought about something that Baba Ranoko Rashidi said. And Baba Rashidi, Ranoko Rashidi, had once said that if, like, let's say that you remove all white people, right, and you leave us here, he said racism and white supremacy will still continue, right, because it's inside of us, right. And so here you have some Americo-Liberians, right, some brothers and sisters who have repatriated or immigrated back to Liberia. And so what did they bring with them? Well, they brought with them their American mentality when they got over there, which led to a lot of the clashes, Dr. Wright. Correct me if I'm wrong, Doc.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
So they
It,
went over there acting like white folks.
Yes.
yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Should I say more? Because
Say more, please.
okay. So if you notice that what Washington says with that, and I'm not directly quoting, but he basically says in that first recommendation that the indigenous Liberian has a legitimate
Yes, he did.
grievance
Yep.
with the Americo-Liberian population who have been resettled in the country, and basically set up a system of discrimination against the indigenous Liberian person. Deeply, deeply, deeply problematic, right? And so, just for myself as the researcher on the issue, I mean, I can't ignore the group I come from, right? And so
Right.
it is a perfect moment to you know uh give my position essentially on the fact that this is deeply problematic, because we basically set up a system that is much like the system here, but instead against African people who had never been displaced and dispersed as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. And so Washington basically makes it clear that if that conflict, and he doesn't, because this is for critics of this. Dr. Maad and I talked about some critics of this work, and but the critics are wrong.
Dead
Liberia,
wrong.
right, in terms of Booker T. Washington, is not an exhibition of the Americo-Liberian position. He is critical of the Americo-Liberian position, even though he wants the nation to survive. He wants Liberia to survive, but he is not staunchly align with the position of the Americo-Liberian that comes in and marginalizes the indigenous African population in Liberia. Absolutely not. So, and that is his, it's important that that's his first recommendation, and the fact that he acknowledges that the indigenous Liberian has a legitimate grievance against the Americo-Liberian, because you can imagine it's almost ironic and bizarre. Here are a people who want to leave America for because of its terrorism against us, because of its marginalization, discrimination, all of that. And then to go to Liberia and set up a system of discrimination against the indigenous population that resembles this system. Maybe not in its terrorism, but definitely resembles the system in terms of marginalizing an indigenous person, is ironic. And really, I'm being soft on it. It's really hypocrisy.
Yes, it is at its
Um,
finest.
Absolutely. One of the things that you might have noticed throughout the beginning of the case, I noted that the U.S. is doing something with regard to Liberia. Their Navy is sitting off the coast of Liberia. And I'm not saying they're doing something like they're doing something good. What are they doing? What action? What are they engaged in? This is what they're engaged in. They're sitting off the coast of Liberia in the Atlantic and occasionally coming inland to put down clashes between the Americo-Liberian population and the indigenous Liberian population, because there is actually, clashes between the groups. And that's all the US is doing. So we're going to break up the black people, break up their fight, then we're going to go back on our ship. Um, but to me, I think it is deeply problematic, and it's an opportunity for us to critique our posture when we relate to Africa and continental Africans who have not been displaced by the transatlantic slave trade, because I do think that we don't critique that enough, right? What our posture should be. And then Washington, of course, goes on with the other recommendations. Let me say one other thing about that point with Liberia. It's in the clashes. It's important to understand that some of the wars that would go on in the next century in Liberia, within Liberia's borders, will have a lot to do with this monopoly of power by the Americo-Liberian population, right? All of the leadership will come from that specific group, and they would essentially be the power holders in the country, and it caused many years of war in the country, and these are the seeds of those wars that would come in Liberia. It's
Mm.
really it's reduced to ethnic clashes, but it's ethnic clashes based on political power and the power dynamics between those groups, and one notably the Americo-Liberian population that have a monopoly on the political power of the nation. So it's important for us to understand that and critique that, and to lay out this case is not to say that one agrees with the Americo-Liberian position, because that's not what's happening with Washington.
Yeah, not at all. He was just like,
Right.
no, like he said they have a legitimate, let me,
Grievance.
yeah, a legitimate, what does it say right here? He says they have very real grievances,
Yes.
against the minority of Americo-Liberians. But I do want to move to the second point of
Mhm.
Yeah.
Washington.
How you say that?
Yeah, he said, man, so the second recommendation that Washington made was he advised President Howard to develop and implement industrial education programs aimed at stimulating the establishment of industry in the country. He advised Liberia against the consumption of Western goods. And I love this quote that you put here,
Yes, I
Dr.
love
Wright.
this.
Yes, go ahead, brother T. Go ahead and read it, brother.
Man, that right there, I was waiting for you to get to that part, Dr. Maad. It says, second, Washington advised President Howard to develop and implement industrial education programs aimed at stimulating an establishment of industry in the country. So Washington was shrewd outlook economic advancement. And the quote here, It's every time a Liberian eats a tin can of goods imported from another country. It is means poverty for Liberia. It means that Liberians are paying somebody else to manufacture the tin cans and paying the freight upon the cans. And all this, of course, means money is taken out of Liberia. This is real powerful because he's like, I know y'all squabble and y'all fighting. Stop that, because the main focus needs to be becoming self-sufficient, not letting the money bleed out of Africa, out of the country, but bring it into. You need to be more industrial. So this is the true Booker T. Washington foundation. What he wanted to happen, make your own, create your own, become your own economy. This is the most important thing of any nation. So I love that quote that you placed there. I'm Dr. Wright.
And that was beautiful. And I thought about us and how our ancestors kept telling us we have to consume, we have to produce what we consume. Produce what you consume. If you consume t-shirts, produce your own shirts. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like if you like to eat vegetables, grow your own vegetables.
Right.
And Washington has, all of our ancestors have been telling us, and so Washington was basing that on his Tuskegee model, right? So which leads us into the third recommendation. He recommended that Liberia establish an industrial school. It says philosophically, Washington subscribed to the view that establishing industry was an important part of building economic independence, and industrial education would facilitate that independence. It says, therefore, Washington and Olivia E. Phelps Stokes collaborated in founding the Booker T. Washington Industrial Institute in Liberia. Both were deceased by the time the school was actually opened. Washington, working with Stokes' support, also put in place a short-term plan to admit Liberian and Americo-Liberian students to Tuskegee. So Washington said three things. First of all, you all need to resolve that conflict going on between the indigenous Liberians and the Americo-Liberians, right? You all need to resolve that too. You need to start producing what you consume, right? And stop consuming Western goods. And three, establish an industrial school that will facilitate your economic independence. And so that's what Washington left them with. And so, family, I mean, when I read, I know that brother Omawali Africa, he was on my platform yesterday, and he brought to my attention an article that was released by CBS that talked about food shortages that are coming, stemming from the war. And see, if we would have been following Booker T. Washington's plan, we wouldn't be panicking. So people are starting to panic right now, T. They're like, oh man, food shortages are coming. I need to stock up. I need to stock up. But had we been following the plan, had we been following what our ancestors said, we wouldn't be in this position as a collective, because we would have farmland that's
That's right.
producing food that we consume. But
Just
no,
think.
because we depend on white folks, now we running and saying, oh, we gotta do this, we gotta stock up. But then when that's gone, then what? And
We
so
have to.
we have to get into I'm sorry, Brother T, but I wanted to just end or close my thoughts with saying that we have to get into the business family of being producers, right? Less consumers, right? And if we are consuming, at least we're consuming what we produce. But we have to cultivate producers, okay? In your household with your children. I never ever, and T, you can attest to this, I never ever told Isaiah Harvey or Jalen to get educated or get an education and go get a job. I always told them to get their education and to create jobs, to produce things, create jobs, create opportunities. That's what I instilled in my children. So anyway, Brother T, I know you wanted to say something, brother.
Just wanted to add what Booker T stated in that quote that was pulled about understanding that you are eating from a tin can, but and also by producing your own. It means volumes, because you can produce the can. You can also grow the food. When people look at what's happening today, with the economic system, also the food shortages, we fail to realize how important farming is. We fail to realize when the gas price goes up. They say, how is that connected? One thing you learn about nation building is that everything's connected, right? When
Come
you look
on.
at food production, you have to be able to grow the corn. In order to produce the gas, you need ethanol. What is made from corn? So we ask why the prices are high, and we understand how most countries have access to the wheats, to the grains, to the seeds, and we don't, because we are just consumers. We are at bay. We are at bay to the person who has the the crops, who can grow, the transportation. We have learned to be so dependent in this nation that we realize that what George Washington Carver was doing, taking that one peanut and taking those and making many things from it. This knowledge could have been passed on, and we could have learned it. We could have implemented it in our lives. Like you said, we wouldn't be in a lot of the issues, the shortages, if we took that knowledge and understand how everything is connected. We just became so dependent on what they give that we forgot how to create it ourselves. And this chapter is a perfect example, and how it was ended with that quote kind of brought me to that conclusion.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Brother T. And I want to show the family this. Brother Omar Wiley talked about this last night briefly, family. This was the article. I said CBS. It wasn't CBS. It was CNBC, who talked about the world facing a severe crisis and famine that's coming. So, family, I'm telling you, had we have only listened to the ancestors, and took that farmland, cultivated. Some people sold off land from their families. I want to get rid of my land. I want to get. No, we should be using our land and cultivating, fruits and vegetables, produce on our land. And so, anyway, family, this stuff is coming. This stuff is coming. So, again, Booker T. Washington, man, he was talking about this almost 200 years ago. You know what I mean? And just not being independent, self-reliant, self-sufficient. But we were hard-headed. And so it is what it is. Dr. Wright, it seemed like you unmute your mic. You wanted to say something.
Yes, thank you. Both, and I appreciate both of your reading of it, because so I always wonder if it lands the information, because this case is even longer. So I had to like condense some things and put the most important things, right? Because it's a long case, right? Can you imagine piecing um, a lot of this together just from correspondence? So that's how this comes about. However, there's Michael O. West also wrote an article about this very case, right? And I talk about him in the early part of the book, I believe in the preface of the book. But yes, you all got it. You hit it on the head. It's Washington's brand of Pan-Africanism, so to speak, is independence through industry. Okay, so if you imagine that all of the Pan-Africanists or prominent Pan-Africanists that we know that had a programmatic approach to Pan-Africanism, I would say Du Bois was one who was initiator of organizational bodies, right? That would go on to lead to continental organizational bodies in Africa that would try to advance Pan-Africanism continentally. But then you would have Garvey, who attempts to do that through mass organization as well. And he is invoking Washington's philosophy, right? Independence through industry. That's why the UNIA is set up with multiple industries. That's what Garvey had in mind and communicates to Booker T. Washington, that I have modeled the UNIA after the Tuskegee model. Why? The Tuskegee model had 44 industries. And so ultimately, Washington's brand, unity for the purpose of eradicating oppression and exploitation. Okay, and what do we do with that unity? We create our independence through building industry so that we own and operate all that we consume. And so if that's a way to understand Washington's expression of Pan-Africanism, because we can't forget, like, ultimately what I'm saying about this long trajectory of Washington's development, right? And I think you are coming to see that now, right? Like in the final cases, and there's only one other case left in the book. But yes, Washington is very clear in terms of what nation building is actually about. It is owning those industries. And if we think of all the situations that any African or Black nation is in right now, we see one of the ways those nations are exploited is because they what? They have raw materials, and those things are being extracted, taken to the West through their industries, producing different things and selling it right back to us for a triple hundred profit. You know what I'm saying? Triple, quadruple profit. And that's how we are exploited, right? Those raw goods are um, devalued, and the industrial goods that are produced from them are overvalued, right? But they can't exist without our raw goods. So why aren't we building the industries? If you want to know whether or not a nation is doing well, find out what industries do they have, right? What industrial plants do they have? If they have very few, and they're only producing raw goods, then you know that they're suffering, and that they're also going to be exploited on the national, on the international scale, because of that very fact. One of my friends and comrades in the political organization I was in, he would always say, it's ideology that makes people starve while surrounded by food, because they not gonna, right? So they are producing the raw goods, they're starving, but they because now they're in a system, they're producing the raw goods, but for them to consume the raw goods, it's being sent to another place there where they have industry, and they repackage it and send it back to you, and you are marginalized in that whole transaction. The thinking, both in theory and practice, which is what ideology is that we have to be the ones to do that for ourselves. We have access to the raw materials. So now we got to cut those other guys out. Okay. I love what the Congo is doing right now. They said they're not going to allow foreign nations to mine particular resources in the country any longer. Now, there's a whole bunch of politics around that, but just to understand the Congo and understand the resources that come out of that, and understand that the Congo was taken from Belgian colonialism to international colonialism, where all the European powers got their hands in it, and the African is still marginalized. That's a perfect example of why a nation would suffer while being resource wealthy. And generally, as African people, we come from the most resource rich places on the earth. However, the people are marginalized and forced into poverty because of these systems. And so, if the nations are, that's a question of leadership now, right? Who's willing to oppose these Western nations? So, I don't want to go too deep on that, but yes, Washington's brand is independence through industry. And you can see how he's saying to Liberia, and he's not ignorant to the fact that this deal wasn't the best deal with Liberia. It's what I always said, what I said before, it's a live to fight another day kind of deal. And the reality is that he essentially tries to transfer some of what would be the gems of independence and through industry to them conceptually, if they really implement some of his recommendations.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So thank you so much for that, Dr. Wright. Family, I want to shout some folks out, but before I do, I actually want to shout you out, Dr. Wright. Beautiful book. Love your book. Family, get this book. All right. And join us back here next week at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to discuss Chapter 6, the African Exclusion Measure. All right. So we'll be reading and discussing Chapter 6, the Exclusion Measure, next week. Family, get the book. I'm telling you, Tiffany has dropped the link in the chat a few times. Visit Booker T. Washington and Africa.com to get your copy today. Also, Brother T and I will be gifting some folks with the book. Brother T, I owe some folks 2 books, Baba, Mwali Mubarudi, 2 of his books.
Mm-hmm.
I want to mail them out and get that out the way, and then we'll grab some of her books and give them out. And so, family, stay tuned. is tuned in for the next couple of discussions. I think we only have, Brother T, what, like
Two more.
two
Mm-hmm.
chapters, 6
Right.
and 7. So make sure you're here, family, for the discussions on chapters 6 and 7, because we are going to be giving away a few copies of Dr. Wright's book. So make sure that you're in the building next week and the week after. I want to acknowledge some folks, Brother T, who are with us, who came in with us. I miss my girl, Crystal Denise. She's usually here, but
Yes.
something must have come up if that sister didn't show up. But I see Al Kibilon, Havback Services is in the building. Sister Virgo, Brother Roger Hootie's in the building. Y'all Pete, Marcus Sharp, he is in the building. Ayapo is in the building. Brother Ray is in the building. Everything is in the building. I see Anna Scribner is in the building. KC, Jesse Green. I see Steve Ohala Mac. Brother Jeremiah is in the building. I butcher names, family. I'm telling you, my students laugh at me. I will butcher the name. I say, what is, I'll either butcher the name or forget the name. It's either one or the other. And my students just laugh. But New Black World Order, I see you in the building. Sutakari, you're in the building. I might have butchered that, but I do see you here, family. My girl Night Rider is in the building. That's my queen right there. Night Rider, peace to you, queen. Peace to you, beloved. Shiman is in the building. A beautiful mind snuck in there, Brother T. She said, "Sorry, I'm late, guys." She said, she's
She was there. I saw her
she
come
snuck
in.
Look, she snuck on in there. But peace to you, a beautiful mind. Peace and love to you, Sister Tiffany. I'm trying to think who else. Jay Street gave us the Black Power fist, Black Power to you, King. Trying to think, is there anybody else? Okay, Brother
Blockchain.
Daniel.
That's right. Blockchain revolution, bridging multiple divides.
Ah,
We have Anthony Holly, Kofi empowering us, and everything is everything. Thanks for coming in, guys. We definitely appreciate you joining us in the chat.
and see you next week at Dr. Wright. I don't know if her phone dropped or what, because I was going to let her close us out, but she got out of there. So I don't know if her phone dropped or.
Lama Vegas came in, popped in. Thank you for jumping in. We'll make sure we get everybody coming in.
Oh yeah, no doubt, no doubt, no doubt. But peace and love to you all. Peace and love to you all, family. And I'll be back on sometime next week, just sometime this week, Brother T, to talk about. There was a clip that went viral on IG, and you all can go to Voices of Our Ancestors. There was a clip of me talking about, who's qualified to teach our community, who is qualified to teach our community, and when I made the quote. Oh, that's you, echoing. I muted Dr. Wright. That's you, Brother T. But when I stated this quote, I said, in order to be certified, you must be verified by someone who is qualified. And that's all I said, Brother T. Okay. A young brother, shout out to Brother Chase. He has a platform called Voices of Our Ancestors. It's on IG. He has nearly 300,000 followers, and I love how he elevates and constantly promotes the wisdom and words of our ancestors. And so he posted a clip, of me saying this. They tore me up, Brother T, underneath the comments. And I say it's nothing but the frauds and the sheep who did not understand that. The asinine, the frauds and the sheep who didn't appreciate that quote. Because what I've noticed in our community is there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation circulating in our community, because now what social media did was give everybody a mic, gave everybody a voice, right? And so everyone's an expert nowadays. And these so-called experts are leading our people astray. And so what I'm saying is, in other words, is that whoever's an educator in our community, they have to be vetted. That's what I'm saying. And so they on the comments, oh, is the sister, oh, because she got a PhD. Oh, so then they started projecting. I said nothing about having a PhD. I said nothing about being a university. I said none of that. Oh, is she saying we got to go to the white man and get the white man degrees? Or she's saying, so they went off, Brother T, in the comments. And so I'm going to do a show this week entitled, Who is Qualified to Educate Our People? Who is qualified to educate our people? Even when Dr. Wright spoke earlier today, Brother T, and I was just listening to her. It felt good listening to. I knew I was listening to a colleague speak, because when you asked her the question, I know someone in the chat asked her the question. She said, I don't know. But what I do know is this. See, in the conscious community, everybody knows everything. You're an expert at everything. No one ever not knows anything, right? But when you talk to professors, true educators, they'll tell you, no, no, that's beyond the scope of my research. Or we'll say, no, I don't know about this, or I'm unsure, or I don't know about this, but what I do know is this. That's how we speak. We don't present ourselves like experts in everything. I don't present myself as an expert in anything, in everything. I know what I went to school for, the area of expertise that I have. I know I have that. But in this so-called conscious community, everyone's a doctor, everyone is an herbalist, everyone is a politician, a historian, an African linguist, and they know everything. I've never seen a community, Brother T, that just knows everything. And then you say, well, do you know? Did you know? I know. They know everything. And so anyway, only the sheep and the frauds got mad with what I said, and I'm going to stand 10 toes down on what I said, and that is, in order to be certified, you must be verified by someone who is qualified. Show me your work and show me who vetted your work. Show me your work and show me who vetted your work. And then we can talk. But the issue, a huge issue in our community, is now everybody presents himself and herself as a teacher, and it's very, very problematic because you have a lot of misinformation and disinformation circulating in our community, which is very, very damaging. Dr. Wright, go ahead, Dr. Wright. Seemed like you wanted to get in.
Yes, I love that you said that. Thank you so much, Dr. Ma'at, because, when you were speaking, the thing that came to my mind was the saying that only a fool knows everything.
Come on.
Anybody who is a scientist, either hard scientist, you are that hard scientist, or a social scientist, you're speaking on the evidence. And if you don't have the evidence, then you say, I don't know. I appreciate what you said, because I've also had to, deal with that kind of dynamic, particularly because everybody got a mic. You're right. Everybody got a mic. They can chime in, and the function, how they function, is to with the expectation that you should come on and say that you know everything, which is, that's not authentic or truthful, right? If you're a researcher, you know that research is very specific and detailed, and and you're not going to say anything that you don't have evidence to back up, right?
That's right.
So, yeah. So I just, I've seen comments in relationship to other shows that I've been on, and I'm like, if I don't know something, that's what you're supposed to say. I do not know.
Right.
And the commentary to that is that only a fool knows every damn thing.
That's right. No, that's right. That's right, Dr. Wright. That's right. And they, they are, like you said, only a fool knows everything. And they said a wise man knows that he knows nothing at all. A wise man knows that he knows nothing at all. Now I'm thinking about Ptah-hotep, Dr. Wright. It was a comment when he says, talking about not being arrogant. Oh my goodness. Hold on, family. I got to find that quote. And a matter of fact, and I'm going to state the quote on when I do the show. I'm looking for it right now. Oh, here it is. Ptah-hotep. Teachings of Ptah-hotep. He said, be not arrogant because of your knowledge. Seek counsel from the ignorant as well with the wise, for the limits of knowledge in any field have never been set, and no one has ever reached them. And so, like you said, Doc, to be running around here thinking you know everything, anyone who fails that way is a fool, because we don't know. We don't know. And so anyway, and Night Rider, my apologies. Night Rider said, I must inform you, that I am a brother, my sister. Sorry, Night Rider. My apologies, Night Rider. My apologies. But yeah, I plan on definitely addressing that audience on sometime this week when I have some time. Brother T, sometimes you get bored. You say, I'll go live, and I hit the live button and just talk my talk. And so anyway, family, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Dr. Wright, won't you close us out with some words? Close us out with some words.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ma and Brother T. I appreciate this because this is probably the first and only time that I've been able to participate in a book club that's reading the book and is hitting all the points. So it's sort of like, as an academician, how these conversations will be only in the academy. And this is a book that was written for the people.
Mm-hmm.
So I get to talk to people who read the book, but in, other settings. This is a different setting that's probably reaching a lot more people, right? Because they can watch it later on. So I really appreciate it. This is definitely a dialectical relationship. In the sense that you're reading my work, but I'm getting so much from it because I'm getting to know whether or not it lands. And that if I really executed the task of taking this out of the academic realm and making this common knowledge and socializing this information for the masses of our people who can access it and use it. So I thank you. I don't think I'm going to meet that many people except for those who are willfully ignorant, who will say that they don't know anything, right, about Booker T. Washington beyond what Harlan and others gave us. Because I think that this is like a really great platform for socializing this information amongst the people it's created for. So thank you so much.
Ashe, and I thank you for joining us. I get happy. Brother T and I get excited. We're like, so Dr. Wright is joining us today. So we get excited just to have you on because this is the first time this has actually happened. He and I have been, a part of this book club. It was the R.E.A.D Book Club. Now it's the R.E.A.D Book Club. But we've been doing this for almost this April or May. Or this summer will be like almost 4 years.
Wow.
That we've been doing this, and this is the first time we had like an author come on to have discussions with us. A lot of the authors are like, oh, I'm busy, oh, I'm retired, oh, and so they never come on. And so this is the first time that we've had an author come on to tell us like, hey, are we touching on the points that you wanted to articulate in this chapter? Do we understand them, right? And are we accurately articulating them to the people? So we love having you here, Dr. Wright. You already know you have an open invitation to my platform. Anytime that you say, hey, I'm coming on, let me know and I'll shoot you the link. But we give thanks for your work. And as I've been telling everyone, you changed my entire perspective on George Washington, Booker T. Washington. You literally, like, in my mind, I was just running with the narrative of elders and ancestors in the community who've made derogatory comments. So I never really looked into him because I heard so much, a lot of negative things about him. I never took the time out to research him for myself. And that's a valuable lesson, Brother T, for me, because I hold on, we hold on to, our elders and our ancestors say things and you're like, okay, well, I'm not messing with dude. He was a Uncle Tom Sambo. I'm not, he's a accommodationist. I don't want to research him, And so this was an important lesson just for me, that even though my ancestors or elders may have formulated an opinion about somebody, to still do my due diligence on that person and not just accept what people say. And so this was definitely an eye-opening. This is definitely an eye-opening book, family. Make sure you visit Booker T. WashingtonInAfrica.com. As I stated earlier, and I think you had dropped off, Dr. Wright, Brother T and I will be giving away some books either next week or the week after, family. So make sure you join us for the last 2 discussions on this book. All right, Brother T, you got any closing words, brother?
Wonderful discussion. Dr. Wright, thank you once again for joining us. Look forward to hearing some more from you upcoming chapters. I hope you can join us for at least the last chapter. But thank you so much, Dr. Ma'at. Thank you for your work that you put out, not just on the book club or your channel, but in the community. And chat, thank you for once again joining us. I hope for those who had an opportunity to catch the beginning, go back and hit the replay and make sure you make a comment below, letting us know what part of the chapter resonate with you the most.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, family. I don't have any closing words because I babbled the entire time. But if you don't tune in this week, we'll see you next week. Have a blacktastic week. Peace